afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I am last but not least. We're almost done. Thank you for hanging in there today. I know it's probably been a long first day of training, and your brains have probably grown an inch with all the information that's been flooded in your heads today. And we've got lots more of that to come. So make sure that you keep things handy through the week, keep you alert, keep you awake, and make sure you ask lots of questions. Don't feel like there's something that you're not sure if you should ask. If there's something you're unclear about that you hear, please take the time to ask, because there's probably somebody in the group who has a similar question, okay? So my name is Ramona Swain. I am Managing Director of Social Enterprises here at Alvis, but I'm also the agency Prea coordinator. And so, unfortunately, we're going to talk about Prea, not social enterprises. That's much more fun. But it's a very important topic. And so, again, as we go along, please take the time to ask questions if you haven't. You don't have to wait till I'm done or anything like that. So, Prea is an acronym. First of all, just for those who don't have any kind of corrections background, it's an acronym that stands for the Prison Rape Elimination Act. So it's been around for many years in prison environments for obvious reasons, that while incarcerated, there is unfortunately, a high risk for sexual abuse of inmates. In 2012, the U.S. Department of Justice finalized standards that also apply now to community-based organizations. And one of those standards requires that all corrections-based agencies have a designated person to respond to, investigate, develop policies, etc., train on the standards that we need to be able to comply with. A third of the agency is audited every year. One deficiency constitutes a failure of that audit and can impact our funding if it is deemed that we are not in compliance. So again, this information is very, very important. And it's also important for you to understand that while our population, you know, we're not taking care of babies and puppies here, right? They may be rough and tough on the exterior, but if someone truly has been sexually victimized, we really should try to help them as much as possible and not judge or make them feel bad if they claim that they have been victimized. So I'm just going to go over today the 6 essential steps, because I know you all are new to Alvis and you will become more versed in all of our policies and procedures as you go along working here. But today, I'm just going to cover 6 main areas that are important for you to know. The first thing, and this is not step 1, but one thing you definitely want to know is who to call. There are 2 numbers you will see in facilities, on information, on posters. We have posters in the facilities. There's information, there's brochures that clients are provided with information about their rights as relates to sexual misconduct and sexual abuse. So the 2 main numbers I want you to be aware of: the 614 number, the 388-9903. That's the main number for you as employees. If you have a question, if there's an issue, that's really the number for you to call. Okay, anybody not, well, I guess we have our Columbus people, right? No? TCRC, okay. Dayton, okay. So again, for you guys, that even so, you will call that number if you have a question related to Prea or client sexual abuse. The toll-free number, the 844 number, is the main number for clients to call. One of the standards states that clients should never have to pay in order to report or make an allegation of sexual abuse or misconduct. So we have a toll-free number for clients. There is at least one phone in every facility that clients are allowed to use that is not a pay phone. And we need to make sure that they have some reasonable amount of privacy. So you'll see in a lot of cases, even if the phone is in an open area, say if this was the lounge, the phone is probably back there sitting on a table in the corner, okay? So clients don't ever have to ask permission. We try to make forms available, information available at their touch without having to ask staff. Can anybody guess why it's that way?
Staff members want to do it.
Absolutely. Because there may be times that an employee might say, particularly, bless you, third shift, for example, you may be single covered. If you are the abuser or perpetrator, the client's not going to come to you and ask for information to implicate you, right? So we want to make sure that they have access to information that does not require assistance or permission from a staff. There are also reports that you will complete, and we'll go over those things in just a little bit. There's a 5-section report called our Prea report form. If any of you are who we would consider a first responder, you would complete section A of that report. It's available on hard copy form or in our secure managed system. There's a Prea tab and you can go right to the report form. So if you're technically savvy and you're cool logging in and doing it that way, that's fine. If you prefer to write it out, you can go to our shared drive and print the report and do it that way as well. So the 4 things we wanted to go over briefly are definitions. Now, I'm not going to read them to you, but I do want to go over some things that makes one thing different from the other, okay? So let's start with sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is basically not physical touching. Okay, so I'm just going to paraphrase what's up here. But you should know the details of the definitions. So please read them when you get a chance. But sexual harassment is primarily not touching. It's verbal comments, threats, lewd comments, pictures even can constitute sexual harassment, okay? But not touching. Sexual harassment kind of gets to that level as a harassing behavior when it's repeated and unwelcome. Okay? So let's put ourselves first in the mind of 2 clients. Because that is, I will tell you, the majority of any kind of issues that come up, it is 2 clients. So in that case, the repeated and unwelcome component is key. So just because someone says something one time out of turn or, completely crude, that doesn't necessarily constitute sexual harassment. The person, someone's around and says, oh, I don't want to hear that, or that's offensive, then the expectation is that person's going to stop. But if they just keep on, and everywhere they go, and every time they're around, they're looking for an audience, they want to, make sexually charged comments about people or to people, that can constitute harassment, okay? The other thing that's important about sexual harassment to know is that the person that it may be directed to does not have to be who reports it. So if Ashley is making comments to Katia may be ignoring her. But if LaToya is in earshot, or if she's in their presence, let's say they're roommates, and she's sick of hearing it, and she has asked her to stop over and over, we don't want to hear that, that's offensive to me, she can file sexual harassment charges, even though she's not even talking to her, or even about her, okay? So look at it almost like bullying tactics, right? You can stand up to that bully on behalf of somebody else and report that behavior. Now, when it comes to staff, unwelcome, yes, but it doesn't have to be repeated. Once is enough. If we say something sexually inappropriate to a client, it is automatically considered sexual harassment. Okay? Now, one thing to understand as it relates to Prea, we are only talking about cases where the client is the victim. Does that mean we don't care what a client says to you? No, it's not what that means. But it's not harassment or a Prea issue if the client is saying things to you as an employee because why? Can someone tell me why?
Because I'm not in prison.
No. Well, they're not either. They're here. Anybody?
Based upon our status as caregivers and their status as being recipients of care and often still being under the purview of ODRC or another sanctioning board, they're unable to give or receive consent in a meaningful way. And as our position as their supervisors, we have an implicit sort of shadowing of them.
Very good answer. So don't think, for those of you here who may be CRSs, that you're just a CRS. Okay? You are still
Could you define CRS?
community reentry specialist, which is kind of our entry-level position. So even if that's your position, you are inherently supervisory over clients. You have a level of authority over a client automatically. Okay? So that means that if you engage consensually even, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but even consensually with a client, that client is always still the victim because you have authority over that client. And one of the things that TJ said that's important to know, we have clients who are still status as inmate. So they don't even really have the ability, theoretically, to say no to you. So you can, in those cases, also be prosecuted and tagged as a sex offender if you get involved sexually with a client. So, and I'm not trying to be sexist about it, but I've been here for 10 years and I've been over HR for many of those years. And statistically, those situations are female staff and male clients predominantly. I will tell you ladies, we have clients here who look like they could be the president and CEO of Atlas. And they drive cars that could be the president and CEO of a company. Some of them are president and CEOs of companies. Remember, they're a client. Just remember that. No matter how nice he is, how attractive he is, what he implies that he can do for you, remember, he's here for a reason. Do not cross that line. Just remember, it's not worth the potential consequences. Because 9 times out of 10, at minimum, you no longer have a job, and he's still here. Why? Because he's the victim. Okay? Sexual abuse. Contact, and I'll just generalize with private parts of the body in various manners without consent. Now that's if it's 2 clients. Now make sure you write this down. Prea only comes into place with 2 clients if it's not consensual. There has to be a proposed victim. If 2 clients are just hooking up and they get busted, that's not Prea. It's a violation because we don't allow consensual sex in our facilities. So it is a violation, but it's not a Prea-related violation. If it's an employee, it's automatically abuse for the reasons we just said, because we have a level of authority over all of our clients. So even if he came on to you or she came on to you and you just said okay, they're still considered the victim. Okay? Sexual assault is really just the escalated version of any physical sexual contact. Keep in mind, an easy way to differentiate sexual abuse versus sexual assault. Sexual assault is always a crime. It's something that's so forceful or egregious where it's a crime. A crime has been committed. You're almost always going to probably need some kind of emergency care, police or law enforcement involved in a sexual assault case. That's rape for the most part, okay? So when you're filling out information, if something happens and you're that person filling out that initial report and you're trying to figure out which category to check, if it was something very extreme, it's probably assault. If you had to call the police and such, it was probably assault. Is it abuse? Yes, it is also abuse. So assault is always abuse, but all sexual abuse is not always assault. Because again, if it's consensual between an employee and a staff and a client, that is also abuse. Are you following me? Or that completely confusion? Okay. Retaliation. Retaliation is when a victim or anyone connected to an allegation feels like now they're being punished. Okay? So if you're a staff person, you know, Eddie filed a grievance against TJ. TJ got sent to jail. Everybody liked TJ. We thought TJ had a good chance to finish our program. We're not even so sure if he really did anything to Eddie. We can't start being mean to Eddie. We can't start giving Eddie all the yucky chores and details. We can't hold Eddie's feet to the floor in areas beyond what our policies call for. Okay? Can't let other clients pick on Eddie. Eddie can come back and say, I feel like I'm being retaliated against because I did the right thing. Okay? Any questions? Okay. So, step one. We get an allegation, something is happening in the facility. Number one, like I said, you want to determine who was involved. Was it a client and a staff or two clients? Now, when we're talking about staff, let's define staff. Staff is anyone who provides a service to our client population, whether that service be paid or unpaid. So as you see here, it's all employees from CRSs to case managers to the director of the facility to the maintenance staff, cook staff. Okay, our cook food service is outsourced. Bless you. So again, for Prea purposes, if a cook gets involved with the client, that's still considered a staff and a client because they are providing a direct client service. So if you hear of somebody, again, even if it's just hooking up, it's still considered sexual abuse between a staff and a client. Follow me? And again, if it's two clients, we're only talking about non-consensual sexual behavior. We want to make sure that we document as much information as we can as we know it. And you don't have to worry about proper English. It's the one time I want to tell you, don't have to worry about proper English. Because I want you to write it down. Because if something really bad happens, you're nervous, a lot is going on, you're not thinking clearly. In many cases, you're just trying to make sure you get the gist of it, right? So just make sure the main information, who the client is, or if it's multiple clients, who they are. How many victims are we talking about? Is this a situation where 3 people have come to you at the desk and said, we need to talk about Eddie? Because Eddie is out of control and somebody needs to do something. You need to write down all 3 of those persons' names, if they have inmate numbers, all that pertinent information, because then you're talking about potentially 3 victims. Okay? So there could be multiple perpetrators, there could be multiple victims. Make sure that everything you know, you document on that report form. Okay? Don't leave anything blank, even if it's something you think, oh, I really shouldn't put that down. Somebody's going to be in trouble if I actually answer this question. Answer it. Yes.
So if a visitor, so I'm a TC case manager, so they're technically still under, supervision.
They're inmates.
If a visit, right? So because they're not technically allowed to consent, if a visitor is caught having sex or something like that, does that apply to Prea because they're in our facility or no?
That's a very good question. Everybody here? If a visitor has come to see their, significant other or what have you, and they're caught some kind of way having sex, is that Prea? No. They probably won't be allowed to come back and visit.
Right.
But no. Good question. document everything, and don't forget the alleged abuser. They're somewhere. So if we're talking to clients, we want to be very victim-centered, make sure that that alleged victim is getting the support, the assistance that he or she needs. But we want to make sure that if that alleged abuser is also a resident in that facility, that we address what we need to do with that person. As Randy talked about earlier, everybody should have a PO. So at minimum, we're going to make sure that PO is notified. If it's after hours, you're going to contact the manager on call, who will walk you through probably what we can do, particularly if you're in areas like Dayton and Chillicothe, where there's only one facility. It's not like you can move them to another location. So you want to make sure that you talk through, and you can always call me. The 2 phone numbers that we talked about at the very beginning, both of those numbers come directly to me, 24/7. Okay? And a lot of people say, geez, you don't even get a break. You know what? That's how serious we take this. Okay? So always make sure, if you're not clear on what to do with that individual, you can always call the manager on call, the shift supervisor, or you can always just call me and tell me what's going on, and we'll talk through it. How was the allegation received? Now, there's a few things that can happen that can bring something like this to your attention. The alleged victim can come to you directly and say, Nathan, I gotta talk to you. This is, really tough for me, but I gotta talk to somebody, and here's what's happened, right? So the client can report directly. The client can file a grievance. So one of the things you'll learn in more coverage related duties is client grievance process. They can also use that process to report a Prea allegation. Do not hold on to that grievance, even if they're saying you did something. Some clients are not shy and not scared. They think you did a pat down inappropriately, or you were trying to touch them. They'll call you out on it. And they may get upset, and they may say, Eric, man, I'm tired of you touching me right there. I'm just going to submit a grievance because you just don't even know how to do this, or you trying to do something. Don't try to stop them because you think you're getting ready to get in trouble. Let the process ride itself out. One of the things you'll see in the facilities, there's cameras everywhere. And wherever you're supposed to do client searches, there are designated areas where there's cameras. So if you know you haven't done anything, that client is trying to make something out of nothing, create a problem where there really is none, then just let them give them the grievance form. Say, okay, fine, that's your right. You don't have to argue or defend yourself to that individual. But do not try to talk a client out of filing a grievance. If you receive a client grievance, understand that we only have 2 days to respond. So you can't say, he's just trouble, let it sit. I'll give it to the manager when I see him. She's on vacation this week. This is going to sit till next Monday. No. You make sure that if there isn't a manager or somebody available in the facility for you to pass that grievance to, you send it to me if it's related to sexual misconduct, okay? Again, there could be staff witnesses, there could be client witnesses, just like we said in harassment, clients have roommates. So a roommate could see something that's going on, even in areas where cameras are not permitted, in the shower areas, in the bedroom areas. So they can also report. And a third party, hey, my brother is there and he's telling me that somebody is harassing him. That's a third party, okay? So there's multiple ways Prea allegations can be reported, okay, that you can get that information. Again, in your own words, describe what you understand to be the situation. Okay? Now, for it to fall under the Prea umbrella, two things are important to remember. We're talking about behavior that's in the facilities or in the community while they're under our supervision. Okay? So Alana is taking some ladies to an AA meeting and she asked LaToya to hold up for a minute. And she may come on to LaToya. She's still the supervisor of those clients while they're being transported to their meeting. So that is still Prea. Just because you're out of the building doesn't mean, okay, now I can say I really want to say. No, you're still the supervisor if you're transporting them. Okay? So you want to make sure you document where, when, etc., because there may be situations where it doesn't. It's unfortunate, and it doesn't mean we don't want to document, right? So if a client comes back from work and tells you they're being sexually harassed by a coworker who is not an Alvis client, that's not Prea. Okay? If they work at Jiffy Lube and they're coming back saying, oh, there's this guy that he just won't quit, we can advise them on what to do. We can call, get with their case manager, call on their behalf, report to that employer, but it's not Prea. Prea is behavior in our facilities or while the client is under our supervision, okay? So again, one of the things to also be sure of as much as possible to ask, was this an isolated incident, or again, is this the repeated unwelcome behavior, particularly harassment? Because you got clients who will take one little thing and blow it all the way up. So you want to make sure you're very clear on the information. If someone's saying things or doing things inappropriately, we want that to stop. But if it's not ongoing, then it may not necessarily be a Prea allegation, okay? If someone alleges the physical sexual abuse has occurred more than once, we want to try to find out as much detail as possible as far as where and when these things occur, okay? Remembering it's all about the victim, not about the paperwork. You're not going to say, hold that thought, let me go find this form, and somebody's struggling in need of help. Get them the help that they need, okay? So make sure that they get whatever their needs are met. If there's a clinician or part of their role is to be the client advocate in the event of a sexual abuse. So one of the things I'm probably going to do, if you call me, I'm going to call the clinician. They know I will call them in the middle of the night if I have to. and say, hey, this has happened, here's what we're doing. Why do you think I'm calling the clinician? Early involvement. And depending on how long that client has been in our program, they likely have some level of a relationship, rapport with that clinical person that they are more equipped to deal with than I am or you are. So don't try to be a counselor. I don't care how much that client says, you know, LaToya, I trust you, I just need to tell you this. You can't advise them on how to deal with whatever the situation is. You could inadvertently cause more harm than good because you're not trained on things like sexual trauma and rape and PTSD, which can be results of sexual abuse. So don't try to counsel, just try to get them to the right help, okay? One of the things, let's say you got a client that says, here's what happened, and I definitely don't want the clinical person here to know, and I definitely don't want my case manager to know. I told you, and you're the only person I want to know this. What do you do now?
Tell them that you're, tell them that you're gonna have to report it and report it.
Okay. So this is tricky. You don't have to tell anybody because they have a right to their confidentiality if there is not an imminent threat, hold on, an imminent threat to their safety. They may not want people in the facility to know what has happened, okay? Now, we want to try to persuade them to allow us to open up to perhaps the clinical person or who we know are the trained individuals, and if not anyone, me. But if they don't, the standard says they have a right to be referred to somewhere in the community. So here in Columbus, there's an organization called SARNCO. Anybody familiar with SARNCO? Sexual Abuse and Rape Network of Central Ohio. I have to think about what those letters are. So there are organizations that specifically deal with sexual abuse and sexual assault. They provide advocacy for victims. They coordinate counseling, treatment, even assist with medical treatment. If a client discloses having been abused in a way that you know falls under our Prea umbrella, but does not want anyone to be involved, you can help them figure out what organizations in the community that they can go to. Okay? I will tell you there's never been one situation where a client has not given permission to talk to the clinical person in the facility. So just so you know, that's something that truly, in reality, hasn't happened. But I want you to understand where Prea is a little different as it relates to client confidentiality. Now, what if the client comes and tells you they were molested when they were a teenager by their stepdad, and they're worried about their little sister because the stepdad is still in the home? Is that Prea?
No, but because the child is a minor, wouldn't you still have to report it?
Absolutely. Did everybody hear that? Because a minor is involved, it falls under our duty to report. So if there's a minor involved, or even if the client talks about having been abused, like she did, when she was a minor and that person is still out there and they perceive that person to be a threat, that still falls under the duty to report. So as Nicole said, even if I'm saying to you as that victim, I just need to get this off my chest, but I don't want anybody to know this happened, that's when you do have to share with that client your duty to report. Okay? Particularly if you know other potential victims are still accessible to that individual. We did have, for example, a situation where a client disclosed having been sexually abused by a minister in their church, and that person was still there. So again, falls under duty to report. Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. So then is there some type of documentation that, like, the client would then have to sign saying, I told you, but I told you not to tell anyone?
No.
Because what if the client then comes back like a few weeks later and is like, I told you about this and you did nothing about it?
Right.
How do we protect ourselves from that?
Number one, file an incident, complete an incident report of what was disclosed, and include in that incident report who you're reporting it to. You would state that you informed client Latoya, sorry, you're standing in front of me, sitting in front of me, of your duty to report. Here's who you reported to, and here's who you're passing that information to. The client doesn't have to sign it if they don't want to.
I meant for an instance where the client didn't want me to tell anyone and I didn't have to.
But once they told you, you have the obligation. So you can tell them straight out, this falls under my duty to report.
No, I think she's speaking about the one where.
Oh, you mean like if it's just another client or them an employee? Then you can let them know that you try to figure out what is their need though.
Okay.
That's the first step. What is it they're asking? Do they want some help dealing with this situation? Okay? So the first thing is to focus on the help that they need. And if they don't want anybody at Alvis involved, then you focus on the information that's available as far as community-based resources. Okay? But I would still encourage them to at least allow you to report it to me. And the one thing they tend to agree with about that as it relates to my role is that I'm not in the chain of command in the facility. So clients have, an obvious mistrust, right? They think, well, if you tell somebody, they're going to tell somebody, and they're going to tell somebody. What if that alleged abuser is the manager, right? So how much confidence do I have that if you go up the management chain, that anything is going to happen other than something bad on me? So that's when you explain that we have a Prea coordinator who is not in that chain of command, okay? And try to get them to allow you to report, okay? So again, third-party reporting, making sure that clients understand that they do not have to pay for any services. So let's say they do go to the hospital or they do seek counseling. Those services are to be at no charge to the client. Does that mean the services are free? No. It just means the client is not who pays. So if you ever hear of a client comes to you and says, this is crazy. I'm the victim here. I went to the ER and I went through all of this and I got a bill from the doctor. Then you just simply direct that to me, okay? And let them know we will work something out. They should not have to pay. Even if it ends up Alvis pays, we will not have the client pay. Okay? Yes. Oh, were you asking?
I only have a couple more.
So the other thing to keep in mind too, if an allegation comes to you and as you're documenting, think about where somebody is saying that the alleged act occurred. All right? Think about whether there are cameras in that area that we might be able to get footage or see some movement to confirm or, deny the allegation. And make that part of your documentation. Because there are blind spots in facilities. Cameras only see so much. And most facilities have a floor plan that's color-coded that will show you where the cameras are and what they can see. So if you get an allegation, it doesn't have to be what's first on your mind, but when you get a chance, if you think about it, look up where that floor plan is for your facility and think about where that client says something happened. Now, if it happened in the bedroom, I'm gonna tell you, there's no footage. But, let's say it's a staff and a client, right? You can see if, I'm gonna pick on somebody else, Kim is a staff person and a client is alleging that she did something inappropriate while she supposedly was doing a room check, right? I can't see what happened in that room, but I can see that at midnight, I can see Kim and that client going down the hall, or I can see that at 11:30, there was the client, she went in her room, here comes Kim, 12 o'clock, doing her house check, because I've probably seen her in other places, but then, geez, she didn't come out of that room for half an hour. That begs the question, does it mean something inappropriate happened? No, not in and of itself, but it does give some credence to what that client may be alleging. If I see Kim go in and 5 minutes later, or less than 5 minutes later, she's back out, because after all, it's midnight, what else is she in there doing but making sure everybody's in there asleep? Should take less than 5 minutes, right? So if she's in there for 25 minutes, then now I want to know what Kim was in there doing. So cameras are not designed in our facility to catch every little thing that could happen spot on, but it can put people in a time and place perspective so that when it's particularly just one person's word against another, we can at least try to see if there's a plausible explanation or, information that we can gather to substantiate that allegation, okay? So, like I said, when we're talking about allegations, these processes have lots of different timelines, and most of them have nothing to do with anything that you have to be responsible for. But I want you to just know some of the basics, like the grievance process. We only have 2 days to respond to that grievance. Now, does it mean we have to complete an investigation in 2 days? No. But it means at least within 2 days, that facility manager, director, or me needs to touch base with that alleged victim to say, here's where we are, and here's what we're doing. So if you hold on to it because you're mad because you think the client is trying to just blow smoke and get people in trouble, you're the one that ultimately ends up in trouble for holding it. Do not hold it. Even if you're concerned that they're trying to put your name in it, let the process ride itself out, okay? We're out of time, but I will ask, is there any questions on this subject? Okay, thank you very much.